Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned into India Tonight, and the US Embassy in India is coming down hard on visa applicants to the United States. A fresh advisory that's been issued by the embassy, it warns that failing to disclose your social media handles from the past 5 years on your visa application could lead to outright denial and even ineligibility for future visas to the United States. In fact, in a statement, the embassy has underscored that every US visa adjudication is now a national security decision. The message is clear. Full transparency on digital activity is non-negotiable. Remember, just on June 19th, it reminded applicants that a US visa is, quote-unquote, a privilege, not a right. It also recently asked student exchange visa seekers to make their social media accounts public for easier viewing. So the question is, what's promoting this increased scrutiny? Why is the US policy around issuance of visas seems to be suggesting that one is guilty until digitally verified? Let's take that across to our guest who's joining us live on the broadcast. Rajkamal Rao, Managing Director of Rao Advisors LLC. He's also an op-ed columnist. He's joining us. Also joining us on the broadcast is Suhel Seth, who's the Managing Partner at Consulate India. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening on India Tonight. Let me come to you, Mr. Seth. Why should somebody's posts and social media handles be relevant for getting visas? How do you really see the tone of the embassy when it says that getting a visa is a privilege and not a right?
That's true. I mean, if you have to go to America, you follow the rules they lay down. The rules may be silly, but America is not known for universal intellect. I mean, look at who they've elected most of the time. So I have a very clear view. Countries must preserve the right of entry, granting entry to people they want to grant entry to. If there are rules that they impose, the rules may be stupid, they may be irrelevant, they may impinge on our freedoms, but then that's the choice you have to make. If you're so desperate to go to America, and if you do need to go to America, you have to go by their rules. And I think, if you see what they've been doing over the last few months, they've tried every trick in the book to change the idiom of America. But again, that's their policy. A lot of people have angst against Trump, but Trump was an elected president. He didn't sneak in through the back door. So it's horses for courses. I mean, it's as simple. They're laying conditions which may seem unreasonable to you and me, but obviously for some reason, they're very au-fait with it themselves, and we have to respect that. Sometimes the silliest reasons are the ones that people follow for no rhyme or reason.
Right. Mr. Rao, let me also ask you, what is the United States intending to do with this alleged weaponization of free speech that's gotten a lot of criticism? Is this perhaps a soft deterrent to discourage immigration from certain regions, and what does this signal politically?
Is this for me, Sumita? Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah, so I think, I don't know if it is specifically related to trying to limit students from India. For instance, this is, I think the notification that went out to all United States missions and embassies. We will be obviously more impacted than other countries because India sends the majority of for international students to the US. So I think this is a topic of discussion for us. But I just wanted to make one point here, and that is that this is definitely extreme, but that has been, as you know, the hallmark of the Trump administration is to push the limits as much as possible to see what sticks. They call it the art of the deal, but that's really what he's doing. Having said that, though, when I applied to come here to the United States in 1986, I remember these were paper-based forms, and there were many sub questions in a section around, well, are you a communist? Right. Are you a socialist? There were have you ever participated in an insurrection? So there were lots of questions. And obviously, we would just go say no, and appear for our interview. Now, I think with all the technologies that are available, and also because a lot of us use social media quite freely, I think they have a chance to validate
Right.
whether what you say on the form is supported by what you have done. And I think that's the step that makes it uncomfortable. But I do not believe it is obviously
Right.
targeted against Indian students.
It's not extreme is essentially what you and Mr. Seth are suggesting, but what's raising eyebrows is the fact that some of these policies that have been floated by Donald Trump, they have been pretty extremes, whether it's on the tariffs front, and of course they seem to be making America great again, or at least are intending to move in that direction. However, there is a fair bit of criticism that's coming in, Mr. Seth. Could this move trigger a reciprocal surveillance wave from nations whose students could be restricted?
Yeah, but Sumita, I don't know if it's only restricted to student visas. From the advisory that has come out, it seems all visa applications will be subject to these conditions. So these chaps are not limiting it only to students.
Yes.
So I disagree with Mr. Rao when he says students. No, it's about every country will now have to suffer the indignation of sharing their social outpouring, their social media outpouring with a United States mission, which I think is stupid. You are polite by calling it extreme. I think it is stupid. Donald Trump should revisit MAGA again, because it's not making America great again. It's making America stupid again. It's more massa than MAGA. I'm amazed as to how a country which otherwise behaves as the super cop of the world, which behaves as the preserver of all freedoms, which believes in liberty, equality, and freedom, is then behaving like an absolute sissy, mean-minded, petty, and pig-headed about people's desire to enter that country. And by the way, when Donald Trump last checked, if he ever did, he should remember that America is a land made up of migrants. It is not a country that, was in existence as a
Absolutely.
civilization and legacy like ours is. So someone either really stupid or really bright is advising Donald Trump, because this can either have huge levels of intellect or huge levels of intellectual innocence.
Absolutely, and it remains to be seen how he can make America great again by, of course, restricting people from other countries, like you rightly pointed out. That remains to be seen, Mr. Rao. Let's talk about the legal boundaries. I mean, can somebody be denied a visa simply for liking or reposting content that might not be according to the liking of the US government?
Yeah, legally, the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1953 gives the Secretary of State vast powers to decide whom to admit into the United States. And that is unfortunately, I mean, that is the way it is. But to what Mr. Seth said, I would, if you don't mind, Sumita, I would like us to go back a few years ago. This was during the Obama administration. And if you recall, there was this lady, her name is Tashfeen Malik. She was a radicalized Pakistani woman who entered the United States on a fiancé visa. And she had been radicalized, I think, in Saudi Arabia or whatever. And social media vetting wasn't the policy of the United States missions during that time. And we all know what happened. This lady went and married her Pakistani fiancé in the United States, and then she went to San Bernardino and she took guns, and she along with her husband killed 14 people, right? So it was really, that was, I think, a milestone in this debate about social
conditions, these conditions have not really been mentioned. These conditions have not
been mentioned.
These conditions have not really been mentioned. It's quite understood. Mr. Seth, would you like to respond to that? Yes.
Enough Americans, as Mr. Rao will bear testimony to, enough actual Americans have killed more people through gun violence. I mean, which planet is he living on? I mean, I know he's a recent American citizen or American person in that sense, but for God's sake, to blame one radicalized Muslim or Hindu or Christian, I mean, I think the argument in itself is erroneous. The reality is people who will use guns to kill people don't need to be either radicalized or non-radicalized. I mean, for God's sake, suppose I have zero social media and I walk into the
Yes.
US and kill people. What will you say? Oh, that in spite of social media restrictions, someone went and killed people. For God's sake, let's use logic. The logic is as
Excuse
simple.
me. Sir,
America
excuse me.
is becoming a sissy nanny state.
Absolutely.
Donald Trump
No,
is unhinged.
I,
Donald Trump is
Absolutely.
unhinged. The reality is that the Raos of the world, the Suhel Seths of the world, need to come to terms with a new American reality. The new American reality is picking up people, deporting them,
Right, sir. And they
having
need
ICE
to.
agents separate 2-year-old children from their parents. Is this the kind of America Rao wants? If he does, then I'm ashamed that we have this America which teaches the world the hypocritical stance of freedom. It's all rubbish. It is absolutely a state in despair. It's unhinged, and it'll only get worse. So my advice to Donald Trump would be bring back the old
Right.
American values, the values of freedom, the values of legality, and the values of jurisprudence. Don't try and subvert democracy by instituting another set of silly
Right.
laws.
so if I,
Right.
so
Right.
if I might,
Right, Mr.
Sumita,
Seth, in America needs to look within. Yes, Mr. Rao, let me make a point here. When Mr. Seth says, then of course, America needs to look within, and of course, there is gun violence, it needs to address that. It doesn't need to blame other countries for the drug problem that America has for fentanyl. And of course, we saw what happened with respect to the tariffs. It was Donald Trump was slapping tariffs left, right, and center in other countries for the problems that his own country really has. So how would you respond to Mr. Seth's comment, Mr. Rao?
yeah, first of all, I wouldn't be so acidic. I would be a little more moderate in what I'm saying. Obviously, he
I'm only
doesn't
following
know
the US president.
But-
I'm only
hold
following
on.
the US president. The US president used the F word, and you're talking about acerbic? I'm being blunt. I'm following your president. The United States president
Mr.
used the
Seth,
F
let
word
Mr.
in a
Rao
press
respond.
conference.
Mr.
Sorry,
Seth,
I'm so sorry. I'm so
Mr.
sorry.
Yes, we did see that. Yes, Mr. Rao,
Okay.
please go ahead and respond.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that free speech and political activism, that is not the only thing that America is about, right? America is also a country that has other laws. For example, America has property rights embedded into the national DNA, and I think again, let's go back to the original question about the social media vetting. Let's not get into other areas. But the idea is that when free speech activism interferes with these other American principles of governance, then that is when it forces us to pause. So, for example, Sumita, you're aware of this Columbia student, Ranjani Srinivasan, right? She was 38 years old, a brilliant student, and she was supposed to have sympathized with terrorists when she was at Columbia. And later on, she self-deported because she was involved in activities supporting Hamas, was the charge, right? So the thing is, there is a limit to how much free speech can get to. When free speech turns into activism on campuses and it interferes with the property rights and the rights of other people, then I think America has a legitimate right to intervene.
Sumita, I must be watching a different
So, but that's
television
well within
program
their
right now.
rights. That's well within their rights to protest within campuses, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
I must be watching a different television program. I'm amazed sorry to sound non-acerbic, and now I'll be very cushy and flowery in my language. I'm amazed at the pristine logic used by Mr. Rao. He makes 3 points: free speech, political activism, and property laws. How on earth are they related? Columbia students have the right to protest, just like students in Jawaharlal Nehru University have the right to protest. When the students at Jawaharlal Nehru University protested, did India say, oh, we will do this to students? I find the logic totally odious. A. B. Where are property rights coming into this? By that logic, the United States has hundreds of laws. We're not talking about that. We are talking about how a country is signaling intolerance, irreverence, and using immaterial grounds to either grant or reject visas. That's the logic. Let someone understand the logic of this debate. We are not saying that in American laws must be trampled over. You guys are trampling over your own laws. We are not trampling. All people want is either the opportunity to go to America to work like Mr. Rao did, to create a new life, as many people have, and to, eke a livelihood. No one is going to, not everyone who wants to go to America wants to go there to create trouble. But you can't throw the baby with the bathwater. That's my problem. The problem is America is sending a terrible signal in the established freedoms of humankind. That is my worry, because everyone looked up to America as this lighthouse of liberty, equality, and justice. When you tinker with basic freedoms, such as the one what Sumita is saying on social media, what Suhel is saying on social media, what Rao is saying on social media, that's when you start destroying the DNA of a great country, which, by the way, America is. America will remain, in spite of the usual blips.
Absolutely. Mr. Seth, I would like to expand a bit more on that, on the kind of ramifications that the world could face, given the fact that there is increased surveillance that could happen within the United States on social media accounts for people who are applying for visas. What are the kind of ripple effects that you think that this move could have on the rest of the world?
I don't know, Sumita, if you read an article in The Economist about 3 or 4 months, 4 months ago. They said that when America did what it did, with the geopolitical stability of the world, they actually created a bloc of allies who earlier were America's allies. They actually strengthened the EU. They strengthened other blocs. I do not believe that these things go unreciprocated. Now, there are countries which will reciprocate, there are countries which will not reciprocate. But the point I'm making, Sumita, is in a world which is truly interdependent, in a world where an American professor like Michael Porter of Harvard gave you and me a slogan called competitiveness, or the competitive advantage of nations, why would you want to create a world with more and more borders? I can understand creating a wall between Mexico and the United States, but why create a wall between the United States and people who actually love the United States, want to go to the United States, and create a different kind of life for themselves, whether as students, as businessmen, artists, whatever. So my worry is, when you change the DNA of a nation, you change it for a long time. And that is something that America doesn't deserve, because it is truly a great society and has been built on the very freedoms that Mr. Rao thinks are today a threat to America.
Right.
So may I respond?
Right,
I did
very
not
well
even
said, Mr. Seth. Mr. Rao, just final comments. Okay.
May I respond to what he said before, or you want me to respond to your question now?
Yes,
Because
sir, please go ahead and respond, and then I'll ask my final question. Please go ahead.
Fair enough. So what Mr. Seth said was that the freedom of speech is unlimited. Sir, one second.
No, when you quote me, you quote me properly. I never
Did
said
not say
freedom of speech is unlimited. I never used that phrase. Mr. Rao, I'm much older than you, but I'm also not necessarily hard of hearing, and my speech is pretty articulate. So I know what I said. I never used the phrase freedom of speech is unlimited. Never in this debate. So, you can play it back later, and you and I will have a drink over it.
Okay. So when international students who are protesting on campuses, if they were to go and physically harm or threaten Jews, is that acceptable?
No, that's breaking the law. That is breaking the law.
That is exactly the reason that many students were deported.
New York state law does not prevent a Rajkamal Rao from getting up and protesting. That is New York state law. I hope you've studied New York state law, both state and federal law. Rajkamal Rao can go to Central Park, stand up on a podium, and object to anything he or she wants.
Sir,
that is not breaking the law. If I heard Mr. Rao,
You're
No, if I hit you,
you're dominating my time.
no,
That's not fair.
because you're quoting me, you're
No,
misquoting
because
me,
you said
and
it.
then building an
You said it
argument.
before. Okay, 1 second. 1 second.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say, Sumita, was that there is a limit to political activism. And what the Donald Trump administration is saying is by engaging in extreme vetting of social media accounts, they
Right, gentlemen, I'm completely out of time on this debate, but thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on what's transpiring with respect to the United States, this increased scrutiny, this issuance of a new policy that suggests that guilty until digitally verified. Of course, we'll have to see it stands the test of law. Thank you very much once again for joining us. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in.